Thank you for having us over here. Been a wonderful experience so far. We've been really moved by the presentations yesterday of Saskia Sassen and Richard Sennett, and the presentations this morning as well. So there's been so many inspiring stories. We spoke about the city at eye level in Buenos Aires as well, in Argentina, and we got a lot of feedback. Most important feedback was that well, your city at eye level is very different to our city at eye level. So that was one comment that we got, but we got a lot of new stories coming to the UN Habitat conference last year. And since then, the project has developed a lot. It's an open source community, which we felt we had to start out of the interest of the quality of public space, public realm. And I'm going to talk about it, mostly giving a lot of examples, because my favorite pastime is to be out on the streets and to observe and to do that with groups. And there's also this book. I cannot give you this copy because this is the last one we have. It's got my coffee stains all over and folds and everything. But it's on the thumb drive, so you can find it there, and we're working our way towards the next edition. So we started our work because in the 80s, this is what they called sustainable development. And we started thinking that, well, is this really sustainable? This might be sustainable from a point of view of the environment, but is this going to be a long-lasting quality that we need in cities? And we are fascinated by how cities develop throughout the decades. This is San Francisco's Alamo Square, and you can see how in 1899 and 1931 and throughout the decades the city changes a lot, but then the street patterns, they are the constant factor. So thinking about true sustainability, we believe that the city should be adaptable, it should be really highly mixed, it should be loved, it should have a soul, it should have a sense of ownership of many users, and most of all, it should have a public quality, and that's what I will try to focus on in this speech today. Now, if you're here in Stockholm and you are around in the old city, in Gamla Stan, there's a 95% chance that you will make this picture. And maybe you already have made this picture. This is the most photographed street in the whole of Stockholm. And why do we photograph these streets? Because we love them. Because this is where we feel at home, and we intuitively feel that this is the type of street that we like. What strikes us is that according to all the traffic regulations we have today, it would be impossible to build these streets in newly built developments. So that's something to think about, maybe. So this is the project. It's now got 85 co-authors. A lot of you are present here as well, because we picked a lot of you in Buenos Aires. We have 35 international stories from all over the world. Thanks also to the partnerships with PPS, with Gale Architects, with the UN Habitat and the Future of Places and the University of Porto Alegre. And we'll try to go through them. And these are all the co-authors. So if you look throughout those stories, and this is really an open source project, so we really wanted this book to be open source. You can download it for free, because we think it's important to get this story to as many places as we can. And then throughout all the contributions, wonderful contributions we've gotten, we've tried to get the lessons out of them. And if you try to group them somehow, it's always about the use patterns, the software. It's always about how the streets and the facades are organized, the orgware, and how the spaces and the streets are created, and then the places, and that could be the hardware. And well, this is everything that's in the book, but I will focus today on a part of it, and that's what we call the plinth. I will try to avoid using any jargon, but if there's one word we are trying to sneak into the English language, then it's the word plinth. It derives from the Dutch word plint, and it's a concept that doesn't really exist, but it's, I think, crucial to what we are trying to get across, and has not been discussed perhaps so much at this conference yet. So if you look at the historic city of Haarlem, and this is the old map, and you'd expect really these ancient houses in the city center. But if you get out of the train station, then this is what you see. And we are always really amazed by what went on in the design room, because people actually designed this, probably. And this is your first impression of such a historic city. It kills the public space. It really kills the public space. You cannot do anything with it anymore. And that's what happens, and is a very important part of what we're trying to get across, is that when cities deal with public space, when they discuss about public space, they most of the time look at the horizontal surface. And I don't know how about you, but if I walk through the city, I don't walk like this only. So if you are a human, then you look around you and you have a different perspective of what public space is. For us, public space is everything that you experience as a pedestrian from the street. So this type of thinking, and I'm going to show only a couple of bad examples and mostly good examples, because we want this to be a happy morning, don't we? But then you get this type of thinking that this is a good street, or this is a happy street, or this one. And it's happening internationally. We got this throughout the decades even. We've got these office blocks of 200 meters wide with only one entrance and a lot of glass and nothing happening really on the ground floor. And we know from studies that if a pedestrian flow in the city, it doesn't experience anything for about 150 meters. It will tend to bend away and lose interest. So this is what's really happening. This is in Paris, La Défense, the pedestrian zone, really nice. And it's happening internationally, of course. Here it says blind wall. And also in new projects, it's completely logic somehow, of course, from a cost perspective, to not build an underground parking garage in these projects and have it on the ground floor. And then this is what happens. And this has been built 2 years ago. So we see so many mistakes. This building in Amsterdam, where I live, it has a facade. It's situated right in the city center. And this is a facade on the south. Now just imagine that this facade would have one door in it with some chairs outside. And this is actually a public institution. We found throughout our work that the most terrible plinths are created by architecture institutions and government buildings. So there's a challenge ahead. So this is the way we like to look at the public realm. So it really includes the facades of buildings. It includes everything you see. And then out of those facades, the ground floors of buildings are the most important. That's what we see when we walk in the streets. That's what we experience when we walk on the streets. And that's the concept, the orange part in this picture, that's the concept of the plinth. So it's not only the facade, it's also what's happening behind it. It's also the function that is in it. Can you enter it? Does it have a connection with the street? Perhaps even visually. And then there's the hybrid space, the kind of transition zone between the public and the private space, which we found is most important. I will try to give examples of that. Like here in Stockholm, it's nice to start with the local good examples, I would say. Or here in Antwerp, or here in Brussels. It doesn't have to be a very formal transition. This is a Turkish trader. Or here in Amsterdam, where you can just put out a couple of tables, or even in residential streets. Amsterdam has a policy, and it's very practical to create this informality in streets that allows you to lift the first tile of a sidewalk and create a garden there, and it still remains public space. But the only thing is that you have to maintain the garden as the person who takes the initiative. And what this does is that it creates a different facade each time. It creates a lot of diversity and variety in the street, and people will take care of it and start to have this sense of ownership over a street. Or like here. Or in Mumbai, we've gotten these wonderful cases since the previous conference, thanks to the collaboration with UN Habitat and the Future of Places. And also in Mumbai, they've been working on really transforming the streets. And well, we've been talking about informal settlements, and there's some contributions in the book about how these informal settlements somehow manage to create by themselves these lively streets and these lively plinths, because that's the way apparently the economy works locally. So we might actually have something to learn from these settlements. Or here in Amsterdam, where a school was created and into the facade benches were created instead of pushing people away and being afraid of them. We really like this concept in Tokyo, one of the new contributions about the machiya, which is a kind of a concept with this semi-permeable space. There's a house at the core of the plot, and then around it there are these different zones that you can enter and close down and open up. And where ma means space, chi means road, and ya means shop, and it's somewhere in between. Or here in London, where the developers really found out that for King's Cross, the saving King's Cross, it's really important to create these good places within the buildings. And I heard Fred Kent say some point that the first 2 floors shouldn't be given to architects. We had this wonderful story last year of Mexico City of how to recreate an alley. So small scale, large scale, it's happening everywhere in Budapest, in Guangzhou, bringing back the water, but also integrating the opening up the buildings and opening it up as a part of the public space. And this wonderful project in Sydney where they created a finer grain within these massive office blocks by reopening the alleys and making them kind of the center spaces for the pedestrians, programming them, organizing them, etc., etc. Or in Seoul, where they have this system of a bonus. You get a bonus, you're allowed to build more if you do good for the street. So what happens is that people take their own initiative, and a lot of changes have happened in this neighborhood, Hongdae, where this was the situation in 2009, and this is in 2011. And it's a compilation of all these small interventions that all together create a vibrant and great area. We're working on it ourselves as well here in Rotterdam, in Soho, where we have really a dead place before and open it up. And it seemed like an impossible building, but still you can find renters who would like to use it, who would like to create streets. And sometimes you're lucky because we got this chef who wanted to start a restaurant and asked if he could put a train there because he collected trains. So we now have a former East German train wagon, restoration wagon. And he sort of created this new plinth to the square and brought the whole place to life. The guy standing over there, you can recognize the chef immediately on this picture, I think. Or on a larger scale, because this idea of working on streets, it works on a local scale, but also on a larger scale. So it's important for cities to work on those both skills, I would say. This is for the whole inner city of Rotterdam. We help develop a plinth strategy, and it leads to these different language and maps where you, for instance, these are the places that you would meet each other. Let's meet at, and what kind of map do we get then, and how are these spaces connected, and where are the gaps in this network, and how can we revive them, like here and here. So what we're saying is that the street plinth may be only 10% of a building, but it determines 90% of the experience, and that's why we think it's very important for cities, for architects, for developers to really include this notion of creating better streets, because it's not self-evident. Developers might have a short-term profit focus, cities might have the pavement focus, and architects might have the building focus instead of looking at the street and having a longer-term value focus, because we believe that this is really a contribution to long-term sustainability. And it's happening in cities all over the world, if you look carefully. Also here in Stockholm, where they have this concept of the walkable city. Now, of course, the next question is, what can you do? If we have all these insights and awareness, what can you do? And throughout the chapters, we've tried to take out all the criteria for great streets, for great plinths, and they work on 3 levels. They work on the level of the building, on the level of the street, and on the level of the context, the area, because no street is similar to the other. There's no standard recipes for streets. Each time the context is totally different, of course. So when it comes to good buildings, and I won't go through all of them, but you can find them on the internet. When it comes to good buildings, it's, for instance, important to have new units on the street every 4 to 10 meters. Then you get a lot of diversity and variety and reasons for people to go in and use those spaces. And we know from placemaking that when we have a lot of uses and piling up on each other, then a place comes to life. When it comes to good streets, it's very important to have coalitions, to look at the organization side as well, and not just to have each one organize their own shop for themselves. And when it comes to the good context, it's very important to look at the pedestrian flows through your city, for instance. What we noticed, for instance, in Rotterdam is that they know everything about every car every minute of the day. And when we ask them, but how do people walk through the city? We don't have these insights, we don't have these data. So we have to develop this new language, maybe. A lot can be done starting by workshops, going out to the streets, creating interdisciplinary teams, analyzing. We did it last year here in Stockholm, where the politicians are really pressuring for this idea of the walkable city, Promenadestaden, I hope I pronounce it correctly. And we're looking for criteria to use. And what we did is we created these interdisciplinary teams of people working on the economics, on the culture, on the building permissions, on the maintenance of public space, but also developers and people from the community. And we went to all these places and came back, and actually in 1 week time, we were able to develop this strategy. So it takes some attention, but it's not necessarily a big step to start to work on this. And then, of course, shifting to this idea of a strategy for the whole city, where for the existing situations it's very important to create these coalitions with existing building owners, with users, and also to try to tempt them and organize different situations. And for newly built situations, it's very important to really have and integrate these criteria into the local policies. So we've been trying to build out this whole open source community, and as far as we are concerned, well, the new book will be launched in Porto Alegre in October. There will be a version in Portuguese as well. We're really happy about that. That all came from the Future of Places conference in Buenos Aires. But this is an ongoing project. Each time we have these new stories coming in, like the other day, a guy told us that, well, you're talking about the experience of the public realm, but you're only talking about what you see. And do you realize that half of the experience is what you hear in streets? The guy turns out to be an urban acoustic. Never knew that such a discipline existed. So he wrote this chapter called The City at Ear Level, of course. So we would all invite you to be part of the discussion and keep things going. And I would like to leave you with this picture of an ancient street in Turkey. And we knew how to get these streets right. I hope this is an inspiration for you to do this in your own cities. Thank you very much.